history and philosophy. Professor Shihadeh is widely recognized for his research on the post-classical Islamic period, roughly from the 11th to the 18th century. This era is often misunderstood, sometimes dismissed as a period of stagnation. Yeah, Professor Shihadeh's work invites us to see it differently as a vibrant era full of lively debates, fresh thinking, and profound intellectual creativity in theology or kalam, philosophy, and ethics. His scholarship has played a crucial role in reviving academic appreciation for this period, showing that far from being passive or derivative, Muslim scholars of this time were deeply innovative and influential. Professor Shihadeh currently serves as professor of Arabic philosophy and intellectual history at the School of History, Religions, and Philosophy, SOAS, School Studies of African School of African and I'm sorry about that. School of Oriental and African Studies, University of London. Some of his notable works include the Theological Ethics of Fakhruddin al-Razi, which I'm holding right now, I'm showing you. The Doubts on Avicenna, a study and edition of Sharafuddin al-Mas'udi's commentary on al-Isharat, published in 2016, and he is also the editor of the Oxford Handbook of Islamic Philosophy, the editor for the Philosophical Theology in Islam, the later Ash'arite tradition. In addition to tracing ideas, Professor Shihadeh also carefully reconstructs the social and political worlds in which figures like Fakhruddin al-Razi live and thought. Among his recent contributions are Fakhruddin al-Razi and the Lit Self-Fashioning and On the Final Days of Fakhruddin al-Razi. We had actually very interesting conversation on the car when on our way to this room. We are deeply grateful that Professor Shihadeh has traveled intellectually and personally to be with us today, and please join me in welcoming Professor Aymen Shihadeh.
So, thank you very much. So that's okay. Yeah. Good. Okay. Thank you very much. And I want to first of all express my gratitude for the invitation, kind invitation to come and visit and speak to you at the University of Muhammadiyah, Universitas Muhammadiyah, Yogyakarta, particularly at the Center for Integrative Science and Islamic Civilization and the Faculty of Islamic Studies and Civilization. Now, in particular, I'd like to thank the Dean of the Faculty, Dr. Nurwanto, and the Chair of the Center for Integrative Sciences and Islamic Civilization, Professor Muhammad. Thank you very much. It's really a great pleasure for me to be your guest here in Indonesia, in Yogyakarta in particular. And this is one of my favorite cities in Indonesia, Yogyakarta. It's a beautiful city.
Mine too.
So I received the invitation quite late. So and the invitation was for me to speak about recent research I published, particularly about aspects about Fakhruddin al-Razi's intellectual biography, especially the time he spent with the Murid dynasty. So I received the invitation quite late, and I didn't really have time to prepare, proper slides. So the slides are quite basic. And can you hear me? Okay, this better? Okay. So the slides are quite basic. Yeah, that's Fakhruddin al-Razi. Who is he, first of all? I started working on al-Razi about 25 years ago, I think now. A bit more than me, about 25 years ago. When I started working on him, he was a relatively little known figure. There was little interest in him. People back then, in the West at least, were interested in earlier Islamic philosophy or philosophy in the Islamic world. And there was a perception that philosophy ended with al-Ghazali and Ibn Rushd. Very few were interested in studying figures after al-Ghazali. But I felt that al-Razi was special, and there was something very interesting happening in his works. And I started working on him, and I published this book, and an article in 2005. And I think I was the first to start studying al-Razi intensively, and to at least in the West, and to take him seriously. Now he's one of the most intensively studied figures in Islamic intellectual history and in the history of Islamic philosophy. Because people have realized that he is one of the most original, if you like, thinkers in pre-modern Islam, and one of the most influential thinkers, by far, one of the most influential thinkers in pre-modern Islam. So this is widely recognized now, and that's why he is being studied intensively. He was hugely influential in more than one discipline, in theology, kalam, in philosophy, falsafa, in tafsir, as I'm sure you all know. You all know his Mafatih al-Ghaib, the great tafsir, al-Tafsir al-Kabir. And what else? In usul al-fiqh, jurisprudence, he was also hugely influential. Yeah. One thing I'm doing now, slowly, is a survey of commentaries on Fakhruddin al-Razi's works. And I've counted so far more than 150 commentaries, mostly dating to the 13th century. So in the 13th century, a lot of people were studying al-Razi. He was hugely influential. Anyway, this hopefully will be published soon. Okay, so what I'm going to discuss in this paper is a phase in Fakhruddin al-Razi's career, and it's an episode in which scholarship and politics interact. We always see al-Razi as someone who was a scholar and who was detached from politics, but the paper, the portrait or the picture that I paint shows him to be heavily involved in politics, not only as a person but as a scholar. His scholarship was linked to his political environment. And the paper really started from an observation I made in the article that I mentioned, the article I published in 2005. I noticed in that article that Fakhruddin al-Razi starts as a kalam theologian. He writes works of kalam theology, and then he writes philosophical works. And then for about 10 years in his career, he stops writing philosophical works, and he writes theological and other religious works. And then later in his career, he goes back to writing philosophical works. So it's a bit curious that, someone was writing philosophical works, and all of a sudden he starts writing different type of work. and then later in his career he goes back to doing. So this observation led me to explore his biography closer and see what's motivated these shifts. And then I looked more closely at his links with the Ghurids. So this period, I then noticed that this period, the 10 years in which he, in his later career, as I said in his later career, there are 10 years, almost 10 years, approximately a decade, in which he wrote theological and other religious works. And I noticed that this period is a period he spent in the service of a dynasty called the Ghurids. Okay, I'm going to say more about the Ghurids, but and I linked his intellectual production to a project that the Ghurids were carrying out. The Ghurids had a religious and political, shall we say, project, and this I was able to link the project that the Ghurids had with the production, the theological and other the production that al-Razi's intellectual production in this decade. So basically, what I concluded is that the production was to a great extent motivated by al-Razi's service of the Ghurids. And basically what I concluded is that the Ghurids brought al-Razi to serve them in their intellectual project, intellectual and religious and political project, and this project was somehow aligned with al-Razi's thought and with al-Razi's scholarly activity, and he produced works that served the Ghurids project. So, okay. And I'm going to show this in detail. So, first of all, a bit about the Ghurids. Who are the Ghurids? So I introduced al-Razi. Al-Razi, he died in 606 of the Hijrah, 1210, so in the early 7th century of the Hijrah, or the early 13th century CE. And I already said that he was hugely influential. Al-Razi, I mean, he has the nisba, or the surname, if you like, Al-Razi, because he originates from the city of Ray, which is near present-day Tehran. And then he moved later in his life to further east, to present-day Afghanistan. So, okay, I'm going to say more about Al-Razi's life, but let me first of all turn to the Ghurids. Who are the Ghurids? Sorry, let me just... Okay, so the Ghurids Empire. Okay, so the Ghurids were originally a very small power. Yeah, I wouldn't call them a state. Initially, a very small power, minor power in Afghanistan. They originated from what we nowadays refer to as Afghanistan, and they gradually rose to power in the 5th and 6th century of the Hijrah. I'm just going to use the Hijra dates because these are the dates that are most relevant to my subject matter. And they gradually rose to power until by the second half or the late, let's say, 6th century, they established an empire covering the whole of Afghanistan, parts of Khorasan, as Khorasan is the area which is present-day, the parts of present-day Iran, Afghanistan, and northern India, and Central Asia. So this was a vast empire, but it was short-lived. It didn't. It collapsed in the early 13th century, and it didn't survive for long. And they were in conflict with other powers to the north and the north of their territory, and they were also expanding in India, and they had to fight Hindu kingdoms and remnants of earlier Islamic empires, and so it wasn't an easy expansion. Okay, so that's the Ghurid Empire. The most important Ghurid Sultan is someone called. So I have a list of the key Ghurid Sultans. Someone called Ghiyath-ud-Din. I'll just call him Ghiyath-ud-Din. That's the first one. He ruled for a long period, from 558 of the Hijra to 599, so that's almost 41 years. And it's under his rule. He ruled with his brother Mu'izz-ud-Din, the second name here on the list, and Baha'u'd-Din was their nephew, who was also a minor sultan under their there were Ghiyath-ud-Din was the grand sultan, if you like, Sultan al-Mu'adham, Sultan al-Azam, and then Mu'izz-ud-Din was a sultan, and then Baha'u'd-Din was a minor sultan, if you like. So it's under Ghiyath-ud-Din's rule that the Ghurid Empire reached its full extent, the full extent of its expansion. So that's the golden age of the Ghurid Empire. And the Ghurids established close links with the Abbasid Caliphate in Baghdad. So, and the Ghurids used this strong connection with the Abbasid Caliphate to show their orthodoxy, their Sunni orthodoxy. They showed that they were loyal servants of the Caliph, the Khalifa, and they were if you like, the representatives of the Caliph in the east of the Islamic world. All their enemies, even the Muslim enemies, would not have good relations with the Caliphate. So they used this relation with the Caliphate was central to their identity, the Ghurids, and to their to their policy as well. Okay, now the Ghurids initially, as I said, the Ghurids rose gradually to power, and they were originally from a relatively inaccessible area in Afghanistan called Ghur. It still exists nowadays. The name still is used nowadays. It was considered a sort of a peripheral and backward part of the eastern parts of the Muslim world. It was a little bit peripheral, remote, inaccessible. In the 5th and 6th century, the Ghur was dominated by a school of thought called the Karramiyya. The Karramiyya were linked to Hanafism, but they have theological beliefs, and they were seen to be unorthodox by other Muslims. They were accused of being anthropomorphous, mushabbiha. Anyway, the Ghurids, the sultans, were members of the Karramiyya, just like almost everyone in Ghur. And Ghiyath-ud-Din, these three sultans, no, at least the first two sultans, were initially Karamiya, just like all the earlier Ghurids. And all of a sudden they became, the rulers of a large empire. So they originated from this backward part of, Afghanistan, very remote part. And all of a sudden they're ruling an empire. And the Karamiya was despised by other Muslims. They were considered to be, as I said, a heresy, but a very crude heresy. And they were despised. No one respected them. The other Muslims did not respect the Karamiya. So what the Ghiyath-ud-Din and Muizzuddin did was to shift, to convert to other schools of thought. They felt that the Karamiya, their adherence to the Karamiya, their membership of the Karamiya, was not suitable for them as sultans of an empire. So they began to fashion themselves as Orthodox Sunnis. So Ghiyath-ud-Din became a Shafi'i and an Ash'ari, whereas Muizzuddin became a Hanafi and a Maturidi. So, and this was for them to have the prestige that was fitting for the rulers of a great empire. And then remember, this is an empire that included much more advanced parts of the Islamic world. Ghurid was a very backward country, but the cities like Herat and Ghazna, Nisabur, these were advanced cities. They had rich culture, scholars, scholarship, and the sultans wanted to have that same level of culture. So they decided to move away from Karamism and to convert to, let's call it more mainstream schools of thought. Karamism, so as I said, Karamism was seen as a heresy because of their theological beliefs. But also the Karamism was a populist movement. It was, it attracted, first of all, it was seen to be populist. So the Karamis were well known for rioting. Hey. Hello. That's all right. They were well known for rioting, just making trouble. Karamism was associated with the lower classes. So as I said, it was associated with this remote area of Ghur, but even in Nisabur, which is a major city, and in Herat, it was mainly the lower classes and people in the countryside who were Karamiya. The more affluent, the more educated classes were not Karamiya. It had an anti-mercantile sort of attitude. So the Karamiya were there's this position called Tahrim al-Makasib, the prohibition of earning a livelihood. Yeah. So that's a position that the Karamiya took. So again, they had this attitude of hatred towards the wealthy. So all of this really didn't give the Karamiya, the prestige that the sultans needed. They wanted to be associated with the higher classes, the more educated classes Khurasan. So, and also the Ghurids cared about their relationship with the Sultan, not the Sultan, with the Caliph. And the Caliph at the moment was Nasr al-Din Allah, that's the Abbasid Caliph, who backed the Shafi'is in Iraq. And there's a possible link between the Caliph and Ghiyath al-Din's conversion to Shafi'ism. So basically, the Ghurids moved away from Karamism and converted to Shafi'ism and to Ash'arism, the Ghiyath al-Din, that is. And that's where Fakhruddin al-Razi comes in. So al-Razi was brought in by the Ghurids to support them in the project of presenting themselves as Orthodox Muslims, as Shafi'i, as good Sunni Muslims, who were promoting the highest forms of Orthodox Islam. Yeah, there were no longer these backward Karamis. There were the promoters of Orthodox Islam at the highest level, and that's why al-Razi was brought in. So it's not entirely clear when al-Razi joined them, but it seems that he was brought in by Baha'u'ddin initially. He associated with Baha'u'ddin, so their nephew. Ultimately, al-Razi moved into the service of Ghiyath al-Din, the Grand Sultan. And al-Razi moved to the city of Herat. Now, the city of Herat was, let me go back to the, no, this map doesn't have Herat. Crazy. Herat is you see where Firuz Kouh is to the west. So that's actually the most important city in the Ghurid Empire. You see Firuz Kouh, it's above the G of the Ghurids. So it still exists. I mean, the city of Herat is still there in Afghanistan, of course. That was the cultural center of the Ghurid Empire. And to some extent, Ghazna, which is the second city, if you like. Firuz Kouh was the political capital, but it was a small city, a small town. So al-Razi initially moved into Firuz Kouh, the capital, but eventually moved into to Herat. And Herat was, as I said, the cultural center of the empire, but it was also effectively the unofficial capital, because Ghiyath al-Din spent much of his time in Herat. So he spent, I think, the summer in Firuz Kouh and the winter in Herat. So Herat was one of his main centers. And in Herat, the Sultan built this mosque. Well, this is the main mosque in Herat. Now the decoration is probably later, yeah, but the building is the building that was that dates to Ghurid times. So this was the main mosque of Herat, and the Sultan Ghiyath al-Din built a madrasa for al-Razi next to the mosque, next to the Jama', and he built a mausoleum, in other words, a tomb for himself next to the madrasa. So that shows you that for the Sultan, that was the most important spot.
Yeah.
Because it's the mosque. He built his tomb, a tomb for himself. I mean, of course, you build a tomb for yourself in the most important place. and next to it was al-Razi's madrasa. So that shows you the prestige that was given to al-Razi by the Ghurids, by the Ghiyath-ud-Din particularly. Okay, and there's a story reported by the historian Ibn al-Athir about an incident that happened in Firuzpur, in the summer capital of the Ghurids. Apparently, according to the Ibn al-Athir, al-Razi, Ghiyath-ud-Din was, if this happened in Ghiyath-ud-Din's court, al-Razi had a debate with an important Karami figure there, and according to the reports, al-Razi insulted this person, the Karami figure, and the next day there was a big riot. The Karamiya rioted in the city. And al-Razi had to leave the city, and that's when he moved to Herat. So that probably happened soon after the Sultan declared his conversion to Shafism, and that shows, first of all, the Karami unhappiness with this conversion, and also it seems to show that they blamed al-Razi's association with the Sultan for his conversion. It was about an incident that happened between two people, but it's likely to show great tensions in the Ghurid relation with the Karamiya. So, al-Razi associated with Ghiyath-ud-Din, and then Ghiyath-ud-Din died, and al-Razi then moved to the service of his brother, Mu'izz-ud-Din, who became the Grand Sultan. And then Mu'izz-ud-Din was a more warrior sultan. He was, traveling around, leading armies, and conquering lands and fighting. To the south there was to the north there were a power called the Karachitai, who were non-Muslims in Central Asia. There were the main, let's say, adversaries of the Karamiya, of the Ghurids, to the north, and they were allied to a Muslim state called the Khwarazm Shah, the Khwarezmians. So they had Muslim allies. So they were the main opponents of the Ghurids to the north, and to the south, Mu'izz-ud-Din was conquering India, northern India. So Ajmer and Delhi, these were conquered, and other parts of northwestern India were conquered during Mu'izz-ud-Din's time. He was leading armies, Mu'izz-ud-Din, and after Ghiyath-ud-Din died and Razi joined Mu'izz-ud-Din, he started accompanying the Sultan on his fighting expeditions. And in one expedition into northern India, al-Razi was with the Sultan, and a group of people entered the camp and assassinated the Sultan. It's unclear who those people are. Some say, some reports say that they were Ismailis. Some say that they're from northern India, non-Muslim, like Hindu members of the Hindu opponents of the Ghurids. Anyway, the Sultan was assassinated, and in a camp in northern India, and some people in that camp accused some senior officers, shall I call them, accused al-Razi of being behind that assassination. So they said that he plotted, that he brought these people into the camp who then killed the Sultan. But there was someone who protected al-Razi, and al-Razi fled the camp. And that assassination and soon after the assassination of Mu'izz-ad-Din, so the third, Baha'u'ddin was effectively became the Grand Sultan, but he died 19 days after Mu'izz-ad-Din. Yeah. So and that's Baha'u'ddin's death. Well, effectively, Mu'izz-ad-Din's assassination marked the beginning of the end of the Ghurid Empire. It collapsed quickly. And al-Razi then fled the Ghurid lands. He went to Herat. Yeah, he returned to Herat. Herat was his hometown then. And the governor of Herat was breaking away, was in the process of breaking away from the Ghurids. After the assassination of Mu'izz-ad-Din, he started shifting his allegiance to their opponents, the Khwarezmians. So al-Razi, first of all, had to leave the Ghurid lands because he was accused of the murder of the Sultan. The Ghurid Empire was collapsing quickly. One of the people, the most powerful of the Ghurids, after Baha'u'ddin, is someone called his name will come to me. Anyway, al-Adin. Yeah. And al-Adin was a very powerful Ghurid, but he was still a Karami.
Oh.
And he hated al-Razi. He was one of the people who was sort of agitating, or he was one of the riot leaders, if you like, in Firuzkoh against al-Razi. So basically, al-Razi's time al-Razi knew that his time in Ghurid lands was over, and then he immediately fled, and he took refuge in Herat. And that was the sort of the sudden end of his Ghurid career. So he spent about 10 years with the Ghurid. He was the most important scholar, and everything came to an end suddenly. So, I said that al-Razi served the Ghurid project they wanted to fashion themselves. They wanted to make themselves into an orthodox Sunni Orthodox rulers, and al-Razi was brought in to help with that. Now, al-Razi wasn't just a scholar; he was a public figure. So some scholars are just sitting on their own, writing books, teaching, maybe preaching in a small mosque or something, teaching at the madrasa, etc. But al-Razi wasn't just a scholar; he was a public figure. He was, first of all, a khatib, a preacher, a very effective preacher. His father was a preacher in Rai, in the main mosque of Rai.
His father's name was al-Adin al-Makki, and he was his first teacher. Biographers describe al-Razi as having a very loud and strong voice. So big body. So he had presence. He had charisma, and they describe his preaching as being charismatic, as being very emotive, and his audience, start to weep, and they're engaged. They engage with him. So he was the preacher, or he preached at the main mosque in Herat, which, as I said, is the cultural center, the religious center of the empire. And he also was engaged in munadhara debates. Yeah. So remember that incident with the Karami in Firuzkoh, that's a munadhara. And so the two debated, and the debate, is between two scholars, and there will be an audience, not a big audience in most cases. Sometimes it's a big audience, but other times it's, like the Sultan and maybe some other senior officials and people. But debate is also a public activity. And it's not all scholars are good at debate, but al-Razi was excellent. He was outstanding at debate. You can tell from his works that he could put arguments, effective arguments. But we have records of his debates. He was an exceptional debater, and again, that's a public activity. So he wasn't just a scholar; he was a public figure. And he was very good at the performative aspect of public life. And that's partly why the sultans, the Urids, brought him in, because he was a public figure. He could have an impact on the public. Yeah, they didn't just want a scholar. They wanted a scholar to produce books and write and, publish, but they also wanted someone who could speak to the people. And show that this is the scholarship, this is the type of religion and religious thinking that the Urids are supporting. One source describes an event that occurred when al-Razi once returned to Herat from another place, and he describes the ceremony around al-Razi, and so he sat in they put a seat for him at the front of the this Iwan, as they call it, the courtyard of the mosque, and the governor of Herat came and sat next to him. A Urid prince sat next to him on the other side, and there was, all these guards were sitting behind him, were standing behind him with swords, holding swords. So scholars are not treated that way. This is a special scholar. He's not just a scholar; he's like a celebrity, because all of this ceremony and. You have the governor of Herat, another Urid prince, the son of the Sultan, the son of Riyad al-Din was sitting next to him, and there's a lot of prestige. It's a public spectacle. So that's the type of scholar that al-Razi was. He was a public figure, and he had wide reputation. There's evidence that during his lifetime, people in Syria and Iraq knew about him. So he was a celebrity, in other words. And Okay, so that's why the Wurids brought al-Razi in. And we can immediately see, as soon as al-Razi joined the Wurids, we can see that his production, his writing activity was aligned with the Wurids project. So the Wurids wanted to portray themselves as orthodox Sunnis, as good Shafi'is, Ash'aris, and just good Muslims. So what do? You write Shafi'i texts, you write Ash'ari texts, you write tafsir. Yeah? So this is what al-Razi did. And then what do you do? What do you also do? You also attack heretics. You attack the Mu'tazila, you write anti-Hanafi works. So that's what al-Razi did. The most important project that al-Razi undertook, or started rather, in this Ghurid period was the tafsir, the Mafatih al-Mayl, the tafsir al-Kabir, the great tafsir. Actually, he started 2 tafsir projects. That's the Mafatih al-Mayl, which is a verse by a verse by verse tafsir, and that continued after the Ghurid period. He actually found it fruitful. Of course, I mean, we can't say that the tafsir was entirely politically motivated. Of course, he really appreciated the Quran and wanted to comment on it. And the evidence for that is that he continued to write the tafsir even after the Ghurid period. But the motive, what instigated this project is service of the Ghurids. And so that's the first major tafsir that he wrote. And then another tafsir work that he wrote is titled Asrar al-Tanzil wa Anwar al-Ta'wil. Now when we think of al-Razi as a mufassir, we never think of that work. First of all, because it's unfinished. It's 1 volume, a big volume, but it's just compared to the tafsir, the Mafatih al-Mayl, it's a much smaller work. And it's not a tafsir, it's not a verse by verse tafsir. It's a thematic tafsir. So there's this idea that thematic tafsir, tafsir al-Mawdu'i, is a modern sort of phenomenon in the Islamic world. But actually we have examples of pre-modern thematic tafsirs. So this is a tafsir that looks at topics, theological topics, let's say, for instance, God's mercy or God's power, yeah? And that's a theme. And then he discusses the theme by collecting all the verses, all the ayat, all the passages of the Quran that are relevant, and commenting on them. So it's a tafsir, yeah, because the whole discussion is guided by the Quran. And these 2 tafsirs he starts these 2 tafsirs in his work. He doesn't complete the Asrar al-Tanzil, I think, because he probably realizes that these are 2 big projects and he needs to choose one. You know, I mean, it's a bit crazy to start 2 tafsirs at the same time. You know, if Asrar al-Tanzil was completed, it would have been probably as big as the tafsir Mafatih al-Mayl. So it's impossible to complete. I mean, you only have a few years left, so you just focus on one. So al-Razi stopped writing the Asrar al-Tanzil and focused on Mafatih al-Mayl. But so again, if you want to abandon Karamism, you want to show that you are orthodox and that you're not simply turning to kalam, but also that you have that you're supporting scholarship on the Quran. Yeah. So what better way to show orthodoxy than a commentary on the Quran? Yeah. So that seems to be the main motive for the tafsir, for al-Razi's writing the tafsir, these two tafsir works during this period, Urid period. And then al-Razi wrote several theological and fiqh works. As I said, if you look at at the works he was writing before the Urid period, they were mainly philosophical, but they were philosophical, but in a still aligned with Ash'arism. Yeah, so he still advocated Ash'ari views, but the works he were writing in this Urid period, they were actually traditional Ash'ari works, more traditional Ash'ari works. So he wrote several works. Like if there's a book titled al-Arba'in fi Usul al-Din, that's a medium-sized Ash'ari text. He wrote another better work, a shorter work titled Al-Kitab al-Khamsin fi Usul al-Din, which is a more dialectical Ash'ari work. It's focused on refuting heresies. Yeah. So the Mu'tazila, the philosophers, and when he talks about the philosophers, he curses them. He says, God cursed them, La'anahumullah, and Ismailis, etc. So the Karramiyya even. So it's that text shows orthodoxy. Yeah. How do you define orthodoxy? You show what the orthodox doctrines are, but also you refute other doctrines, you refute heresy. So orthodoxy has to be defined in relation to heresy. And this is what he does in this work. It's a short work, it's relatively accessible, it's dedicated to Mu'izz ad-Din, the second Sultan, and it has this, it's like a map for orthodoxy. If you want to be orthodox, you have to avoid these heresies, and these are the heresies. And he wrote several works, theological works. Another theological work dating to this period is Ta'sis al-Taqdis, is a work titled Ta'sis al-Taqdis, which is a refutation of Karrami and of tashbih, of anthropomorphism, both in Karramism and also in what he considered Hanbalism. So, but mainly Karramism. So again, that's a refutation of a heresy. Okay. So yeah. If we look at other aspects of al-Razi's production in this period, it's aligned with his patron's projects. Theology, tafsir, fiqh. There are refutations of Hanafism also, which are supportive of Shafi'ism. Shafi'i and Shafi'ism are a central part of his, sort of identity in this period. There are also works in which he mentions the Caliph, the Abbasid Caliph, which again is aligned with the Urid project. And speaking of the Abbasids, I'll just conclude with this. The Caliph al-Nasir al-Din Allah, of course, became aware of al-Razi, and he bestowed a title on him, الداعي إلى الحق, or الداعي إلى الله. So this is a title that's an expression that often occurs next to or before al-Razi's name in manuscripts. It was often treated as, it was often, no one had paid any attention to it. But I found in a source that this was actually conferred, given to him. It's a laqab, a title given to him by the caliph. Yeah, so this is that gives it an importance. It's not just any expression that's associated with it. It's actually a title given to him by the caliph. Okay. Right, so I'll stop here, and basically this is a way in which, or an example of a scholar working closely with political power and being in service of it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Ayman, for very important and enriching presentation. Just to make sure that our students fully understand and follow the presentation, I think I need to give short summary, translated summary in bahasa Indonesia. Jadi ini cerita tentang satu fase dalam kehidupan al-Razi, terutama cerita ini berhubungan dengan bagaimana dunia keulamaan, dunia keilmuan itu bisa berhubungan dengan dunia politik. Al-Razi menjadi, kalau istilah Indonesia itu kaki tangan atau sarjana yang digunakan oleh dinasti Muhammadiyah untuk melegitimasi paham agama yang dipakai oleh dinasti Muhammadiyah. Nah, dinasti Muhammadiyah itu ada di Afghanistan. Lawan politiknya adalah Khwarizm Shah. Pada satu poin dalam sejarah, Muhammadiyah itu bermazhab Karomiyah yang dilihat oleh aliran lain sebagai mazhab sesat. Mazhab sesat. Dua paham tadi yang beliau sebutkan, pertama musyabbihah, jadi ayat-ayat yang menggambarkan Tuhan mempunyai fisik. Tuhan punya fisik beneran. Kalau disebut Tuhan punya tangan, ya punya tangan seperti manusia. Musyabbihah atau mujassima, ada yang say? Mujassima dan musyabbihah. Oke. Jadi karomiyah disebut sesat karena memahami ayat-ayat sifat itu ya Tuhan punya tangan seperti tangannya manusia, mata seperti matanya manusia. Kedua, soal urusan duniawi sangat-sangat zuhud, tahrimul makasib gitu tadi. Jadi nggak usah kaya-kaya banget lah gitu. Nah, Ghurid kerajaan kecil sebenarnya, mainly di Afghanistan, mungkin sampai ke India juga, tetapi ingin bertransformasi jadi kerajaan besar. Caranya yang meninggalkan karomiyah yang disebut sebagai aliran sesat. Secara fikihnya karomiyah, secara akidah karomiyah, secara fikih Hanafiyah. Sultannya yang tadi disebut Ghiyazuddin memilih untuk pindah dari karomiyah menjadi Asy'ariyah. Asy'ariyah ya aliran paling besar, dan Syafi'iyah. Nah, dia menggunakan medium ilmuwan terkenal yang bernama al-Razi. Al-Razi ini bukan hanya ulama yang menulis buku, dia orator, public speaker, penceramah, yang kalau ngomong tuh bisa menarik emosi orang juga. Jadi orang yang cocok untuk digunakan untuk merebranding Ghurid dari paham yang sesat menjadi paham yang baru. Itulah yang menjelaskan kenapa pada fase selanjutnya dalam kehidupan al-Razi dia lebih banyak menulis kitab-kitab yang tradisional, banyak menulis kalam, dan kitab tafsirnya yang fenomenal ini Mafatihul Ghaib ditulis setelah dia menjadi bekerja untuk Sultan Ghurid. Sebelumnya sangat filosofis, rasional, tapi sekarang tiba-tiba menjadi sangat tradisional. Ya alasannya karena dia ingin merebranding Ghurid. Jadi, dan dia memang dapat banyak keuntungan juga. Sekolah aja dibangunin, tadi disebutkan Dia dibangunkan sekolah oleh Sultan Ghurid. Kalau dalam buku lain bahkan disebut punya banyak harta juga, punya uang juga. Ghurid kemudian dikalahkan oleh lawan politiknya Khwarizm Shah. Ghurid itu kalau bahasa Arabnya Ghuriyah, dikalahkan oleh Khwarizm Shah. Tapi uniknya oleh lawan politiknya dia dipakai lagi. Jadi dia tidak dianggap sebagai orang rezim lama, nggak apa-apa masuk lagi rezim baru gitu. Jadi akhir hayatnya dia hidup di bawah rezim Khwarizm Shah. Jadi ini sisi lain dari kehidupan al-Razi, intelektual, polymath, but has a strong connection with political power. And it happened in our history. It also happened in the case in the life of al-Ghazali, for example. So that is a very short summary of very important presentation. Now I open Q&A session. Please feel free to ask anything about al-Razi or about the topic itself. We have Brother Halim here. And our students, please. Pak Siva. This is my student from Uzbekistan. Remind me your name, please.
Daniel.
Not Daniel, of course. Damir. Any other students want to ask? Yes, please. We have 4. Later on, please mention your name. If we have more participants who want to ask, I can give you later a chance. Please, brother.
Should I can hold it. Right.
Yes,
Should I stand here?
yes, over there.
Okay. Assalamualaikum. Thank you for the talk. It's very insightful. My name is Halim. I'm a student. I'm a third-year student at Georgetown University in the Department of Arabic and Islamic Studies. I happened to be here, so I didn't know the event until yesterday. My friend Iqbal told me that there is an event here and you are here. And I saw you last semester at my campus because you were invited. But I came late, so I didn't really have chance to talk and, to ask you. So, thank you for this talk. I never knew that he was that close to the politics back then with the Ghurid Empire, Sultanate. So I have 3 questions. The first is there anything related? Is anything from your project related to Indonesia that you come here? Is there any intellectual history that you want to research about Indonesia in relation to Fakhruddin al-Razi, or is it purely because you were invited by? Because I'm curious how. Because I know that Fakhruddin al-Razi is the peak of, I would say, the peak of Ash'arite scholar, and it's so unfortunate that in Indonesia we don't really know his name. There are people know his name, but it's only in university, in pesantren or in madrasa, the traditional boarding school. I never heard his name. I was trained there for 6.5 years and never heard his name. So that's the first question. And second question is, which point throughout your research back then that turned your attention to his relation with the politics? Because I know that you did your research on the ethics, the teleological ethics of Fakhruddin al-Razi, and I read your book entirely for 2 weeks,
Cover to cover.
cover to cover. So I know how he changed from voluntarism to perfectionism and he ended in pessimism. And but I was curious, in which part of your process of research and study that you turned to this relation between him and the Ghurid Sultan. And thirdly, my third question is related to Sufism. I've always felt curious when reading so many books and treatises in primary sources in Arabic, and I never knew any theologian, any mutakallim, who is criticized or talked about by so many great Sufis. I know that the author of Awarif al-Ma'arif, Shihabuddin Suhrawardi, he talked about him in a negative note, and Rumi mentioned his name in the Mathnawi volume 5. in a negative note as well. Ibn Arabi wrote him a letter, and you name it. So many great Sufis, criticized him for not entering Sufism. Even this person Najmuddin Kubra, who is the murshid of Rumi's father, he also criticized him. I mean, he trained him. He almost got him into Sufism, but based on an article written after your article by Muhammad Rustam. I don't know the authenticity of the story. He said that there's a narrative that told about his being trained by Najmuddin al-Kubra, and he was told to seclude himself in a room, and Najmuddin Kubra tried to to remove all, to learn everything that he, because he was so bookish. So, if you want to reach certainty, you have to remove everything that you read, because that's not how you know things for certain. And, I never knew any mutakallim who is criticized so much by many great Sufis, and he lived in the, 13th century. 13th century is the age of marvels. Like Marvels, you have Captain America and all these, figures. That's the century where the marvels of Sufi appear. Najmuddin, Rumi, you name it, Fakhruddin Attar, Ibn Arabi. Ibn Arabi wrote him a letter, and I read the letter. I would like to read one part of his letter, to Ibn Arabi's letter to him. وقد علم ولي وفقه الله تعالى إن حسن اللطيفة الإنسانية إنما يكون بما تحمله المعرفة الإلهية وقبحها بضد ذلك وينبغي للعالي الهمة ألا يقطع عمره في المحدثات وتفاصيلها فيفوته حظه من ربه وينبغي له أيضا أن يسرح نفسه من سلطان فكره فإن الفكر يعلم ما أخذه والحق المطلوب ليس ذلك وإنما العلم بالله خلاف العلم بوجود الله. That's a very mind-blowing criticism to me. If you don't mind, I'll translate to Indonesian for people. So Ibn Arabi pernah mengkritik Fakhruddin al-Razi. Dia bilang bahwa sesungguhnya keindahan batin manusia itu tergantung sama pengetahuannya kepada Tuhan. Buruknya batin manusia itu juga tergantung sama pengetahuannya tentang Tuhan. Orang yang punya himmah atau kemauan yang tinggi itu harusnya tidak membuang-buang waktunya untuk mungkinat, untuk hal-hal yang muhdatsat, itu dunia gitu ya, pikirannya. Soalnya nanti kalau dia mikirin dunia terus, jatahnya untuk ngerti Tuhan itu habis gitu selama di dunia. Dan orang kalau punya pikiran, soalnya Fakhruddin al-Razi is a very intelligent person. So he told him that ayasroha nafsahu min sultani fikrihi. Dia harus membebasin dirinya dari kuasa pikirannya, harus melampaui pikirannya gitu, masuk ke hati maksudnya. And then one note that I read from your tahqiq of Fakhruddin al-Razi, there is this part, وهو معرفة الإله, the highest knowledge, وهو أشرف الأقسام, ولكن من الذي وصل إلى عتبة تلك الحضرة العالية. So this is the pessimism of al-Razi at the end of his life. ومن الذي شم رائحة ذلك الجناب المقدس فحاصل العقول ذنون وحسبانات ومنتهى الأمر أوهام وخيالات. So my question is it really the end of his conclusion about God, which is he was so pessimistic about knowing God? God cannot be known for certain, or are there any works like what you mentioned about the tafsir? What was that? Asrarul Tanzil wa Anwar Ta'wil, or and I was curious about what's the difference between, okay, it's thematic and the other is verse by verse, but is there any content related to Sufism told more in that? Okay, thank you for that. I'm sorry for the very long question.
Thank you for this question. Shall I answer?
Do you want me to come back to that?
That's fine. But, no,
You prefer to answer?
up to you. No, it's up to you.
Yeah, because we need to shorten the time.
Okay.
Then, Pa Shifa? Please.
Okay, just a short question regarding when al-Razi with Ghuri in Ghuriya and facing not only Karami, just the Mushabbih, but also the Mu'tazila. I also probably facing Sufis, facing Ismailis at the time, and he worked the work on Nalbarat as well. I'm curious whether he has a different strategies in dealing with Karamis in terms of their anthropomorphism tendency, and Mu'tazilah who has rational tendency, and also probably the Ismaili or Sufis at the time. And the second one regarding the ulama and politics, because the previous scholars, as mentioned also by Dr. Rafiq, Juwaini, Ghazali, working with Seljuks, they are trying to support the orthodoxy new, what's so-called Sunni revival during the previous century with the Mulk, and at this time Fakhruddin al-Razi with al-Ghuri. It means it seems to be suggesting that if you want to be a good scholar, you need to work with a political patron. Does that still apply for today? Because without funding from the government or from the economic patron, then how can you work?
Exactly.
Things like that. Thank you.
Okay. Please.
His scholarship. No sponsorship.
At least grand.
Yeah.
Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to our university. I'm also economics student here. I also interested in history. So my question is, what is the exact reasons you chose Fakhruddin al-Razi before starting your research? And my second question, after starting research, what kind of difficulties or troubles you met with collecting data and learning his life? Because the books, data belong to approximately 9 centuries ago. So, and how was your journey for research?
You, please, the last one. I invite female students. If you will ask.
Assalamualaikum. Thank you for your presentation. Well, actually, I had my bachelor's in Islamic studies, but now I'm studying in another major. But I have some two questions actually about Fakhruddin al-Razi. The first question is, as we know, some scholars accused Avicenna for his philosophical ideas. What kind of philosophical ideas al-Razi kind of criticized Avicenna's? And the second question is, can we say al-Razi like a follower of al-Ghazali's ideas, or he went beyond of his ideas? These two questions. Thank you.
These questions actually need a semester or more to answer. Okay, thank you. Is there any questions from female students? Please, don't be shy to ask about anything. Okay, all right. Please.
Okay, well, thank you very much for these questions. So, so anything related to Indonesia? So the reason I'm in Indonesia is not to study Razi, but no, it's to make links with colleagues here and to to experience academia in Indonesia.
To find you al-Razi.
Because I wanted to visit Indonesia as well. Thank you. Traditional boarding schools and teaching. The thing about curricula and canons, they keep changing. So think about this. Why there are so many Ash'ari Muslims around? There have always been, in the last 10 centuries or so, Ash'ari Muslims around. How many works of al-Ash'ari do we have? How many of al-Ash'aris, Abu al-Hasan al-Ash'ari, are lost? Many. Most of his works are lost. So how come so many Muslims identify as Ash'aris, and al-Ash'aris, Abu al-Hasan al-Ash'ari's works are so neglected? The explanation is that people didn't read al-Ash'ari. Ash'ari didn't read Abu al-Hasan al-Ash'ari's works.
They were reading other Ash'ari texts.
Yeah.
So it's the same. Someone is important, is very influential, but his ideas are, he has influence, but his ideas are transmitted indirectly, and then people read the latest books. Yeah. So after Taftazani and the Ligi, where people stopped reading al-Razi, they started reading Taftazani. So that's normal. And I imagine in boarding, I'm not familiar with the curricular boarding schools, Pesantrans, yeah, but I imagine they're like al-Azhar, you know, if in the 19th century people read E.G. and Muwaqqif, Jurjani and so forth. So they didn't read Juwayni or Baqillani and so forth. And Baqillani is another example.
Right.
One of the most famous, important Ash'ari, and his most important work is Muhammadiyah.
Right.
When did I turn my attention to politics? Okay, so I take more than one approach to this in my research. So some of my work is more history of philosophy sort of type. Other publications are more intellectual history in their approach. In other words, in some publications, I focus on the ideas and how the ideas, and I try to understand the ideas and develop the ideas. In other studies, I look at the context. I can't remember why I decided to study the political context of al-Razi. I can't remember how it started. I was, I think there are lots of reports about al-Razi working with the Ghurids. Al-Razi mentions the Ghurids in his work. Sometimes he dedicates books to them. And I think I looked into some of these links, and that led me to further exploration. And it's something that I found very fruitful. So that's how. But you're right. I mean, I don't do this in all publications, because in other publications I'm more focused on the ideas. Sufism. I have a chapter on the subject, on al-Razi's relation to Sufism, in a book titled Sufism and Theology, which I edited. In that book, I look at reports of his meeting with Najmuddin Kubra. I established that the meeting is probably historical. It did happen. But some of the later reports are probably fictional.
Right.
You know, something like the report you mentioned about him going to Filwa, etc.
Yeah.
There's no evidence. This is later. These are later elaborations. Apparently he did meet Najmuddin, what's his name, Najmuddin Kubra, and according to one report, Kubra told him, come and study Sufism with me, and Razi said, no, I don't have the time, he declined, and Razi became because he was so influential as a mutakallim, he did philosophy, kalam, and you read the tafsir, there's a lot of aqliyat in the tafsir, etc. He became the representatives of aql for the ulama, and that's why and then this link with the Kubra and Ibn Arabi, that sort of inspired this sort of contrast between him and other Sufis and contemporary Sufis. He became like the archetypal mutakallim, the representative of kalam and aql and even falsafa, as opposed to. So it's a lot of it is later elaboration. People start to give him as the example. It's like when people talk about Einstein as intelligent person, etc. It's the same. They were talking about al-Razi as someone with great aql and who represents the Sufi tradition. So why do the Sufis, keep talking about him negatively? I think this is one of the main reasons he was seen as a representative of aql, and he just. Yeah, you want to give an example of a person who represents aql? Of course, it's al-Razi. But I'm not aware of Shihabuddin Suhrawardi criticizing al-Razi in al-Ma'arif.
Not in Al-Warif al-Ma'arif, but in another book.
In another book.
I think Rustam wrote an article about that. He mentioned about it. Yeah.
So
I can share with you.
Yeah, but I mean, Kubra, Ibn Arabi also wrote this letter to him, and we have no idea what happened after.
Yeah, I was wondering if he reacted to Ibn Arabi.
No, he didn't.
No?
I mean, there's no evidence of that.
All right.
Okay, another question. The Razi criticized Mu'tazila. He didn't criticize Sufis. Sorry, who asked this question? Oh, yeah, of course. He didn't criticize Sufis as such, but he criticized the Mu'tazila because the Sufis were mostly. Many of the Sufis were like Sunnis. I mean, his father was, a bit of a Sufi, but he's criticized the Mu'tazila, Ismailis, and others. The Karamiya, I mean, were probably considered less developed. Karami theology was seen as being less developed than Mu'tazila theology. And al-Razi's criticism of the Karamiya is, so the debate is really around Tashsim and Tashbih, So Tashsim mainly, view that God is a body, and it's a different tone. I mean, with the Mu'tazila, there were actually few Mu'tazila at his time. They were mostly in Transylvania, in parts of Khwarazm, I think, and they weren't that relevant. Whereas the Karamiya were relevant, and they were influential or powerful. In eastern parts, I mean, he paid more attention to the Karamiya, I think, dialectically. But he treated them as a less sophisticated heresy than Mu'tazila. So there's a difference in tone and approach. Ulama and politics, that's a good question. I mean, a big question. So to be a successful scholar back then, one had to prove oneself. And proving oneself, you can write books, but how do scholars make a living? I mean, that's, I think, the question. So, you can be a mudarris, like you teach at a madrasa, or preach, or, lead the prayer, be an imam. That can give someone some livelihood. But if you're an ambitious scholar, and you want to go beyond being, the preacher at the imam at the village mosque, you have to prove yourself. And proving oneself is not simply by writing books, good books. It's by performing well in public. So the munadara, the debates were very important.
Yeah.
Because you perform in front of the people who have the money, and that's why, I mean, there are stories like this famous story about Taftazani and Jurjani having a debate, and then Taftazani losing and being criticized by the ultimate Khalifa, and then he became so distraught. And it's, I mean, this is typical. It's a munadara can make or break someone, because you can. It's like an oral exam. You either lose or fail, and after the munadara, only one can win sometimes. So it was very important for scholars to prove themselves in public. Ambitious scholars, of course. so there was a lot of competition. And preaching was also very important. It's a public thing, and activity, and again, rulers care about good preachers. So yeah. I mean, but there were other ways for scholars to earn a living. They could be a teacher at a madrasa. They didn't have to associate with the Saladin to be that, to have a position at the madrasa in most cases. It's a big question, and I think it needs further study. But often there is a relation between scholarship and power, but it's not a necessary relation. It's an important relationship. Okay, why choose al-Razi for research, and what are difficulties? So I started studying al-Razi because, when I was studying him, there was very little interest in him. But I was interested in studying both theology and philosophy. Yeah, so, and I was interested in ethical theory, and I decided to look at this guy who was writing both philosophy and theology, and who no one was interested in. And I found that he had a lot of interesting things to say. So, and that's how it started. I think there are still in Islamic intellectual history, there are still a lot of understudied sources. Not all of them are very interesting, but some are. And the fact that they're understudied means that there's still a lot of work to be done, and important discoveries to be made, very important work to be done. So yeah, I think I identified a gap in scholarship, and that's how I. What difficulties? I think one difficulty was that when I started working on him, is that many of his works were unpublished. I had to travel to get copies, manuscript copies, access manuscripts. One academic difficulty, or not academic, but one difficulty that is intrinsic to his works is that he wrote philosophical and theological works, and tried to just construct a narrative that brings together the two can sometimes be tricky. So there are puzzles in his thought, and in the development of his thought, and how it all hangs together. I think this often presents difficulties, but these are challenges that are, I think, interesting challenges, and one can try to solve them. They're not insurmountable. Okay, there's finally a question about philosophical views about Razi, and his relationship. So yeah, Razi in his philosophical works engages positively with philosophy. However, on the core questions of theology, his views are aligned with Ash'ari views, in my opinion. When he discusses whether the world is created or pre-eternal, he says that the world is created. So his views are, I wouldn't say Ash'ari views, but they're aligned with Ash'ari views. On the face of it, if you look at the formulation of the doctrines, they sound like they're Ash'ari. But when you look at the underlying theory, you'll find that it's different. But at the end of the day, his views are similar to Ash'ari views. There is definitely a theological influence. And you can see this in his philosophical works. But is he a philosopher? I think he is a philosopher at the end of the day, because he engaged with philosophy in a philosophical way, and not in simply a theological way. Yeah. Is that answer the question?
Yes.
Okay. So.
All right. Thank you very much. Give a big applause for our professor. I think if I may summarize the whole presentation, we can safely say that scholarship and politics are always link each other. Studying from the experience of al-Razi. Yes, if you live in the medieval period, you need patronage, you need government funding, but you need to also perform. You need to be able to show it in front of the public as a debater, as a public preacher. But as our professor says, you can also earn the living by open your own madrasa. It's not always necessary, the patronage. The big source of income, of course, the government funding or patronage. With that, we close our session, and I would like to, on behalf of our university, to give sincere gratitude and warm gratitude to our Professor Ayman for coming to this university and give a very insightful lecture. And please once again give applause to our professor. And also thank